Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm among friends. और प्रोफेसर महबूब साहब का बहुत शुक्रिया for such a generous and very warm introduction. Professor Qamar Abbas साहब बैठे हैं, my worthy colleagues from Government College, from Punjab University. So I am among my own colleagues, among my own friends, and speaking to you people, young historians. It's my privilege to be here, one of the most prestigious institutions in Pakistan, rather in South Asia, and so I am part of the family. I'm not a visitor, I'm not a guest, and I'm not too far from here. I'm at Government College Lahore, and when I tell students there that I was a student 52 years ago, I graduated 52 years ago, they look at me and they think, oh God, he's still alive. 52 years old. Well, 52 years for a historian is just yesterday, isn't it? We talk of centuries, we talk of millennia. Sometimes I tell my friends and students back in England or here that I'm a millennium old, 1,000 years, because I was born in the past millennium, and a century you could say, the 20th century. But anyway, Professor Saab asked me to speak to you about archives and archival research, which could be a very boring subject. So I've been thinking about it, how to make it a bit interesting. So what I did, I sort of talk about some of the contemporary issues that we face today and how archives are so important, not just for historians, for all kind of different reasons. Whether you are writing a book, or you are a former president of the United States, or you are, writing a novel, or you're writing a travelogue, I think archives just don't mean, written stuff. It could be buildings, it could be oral narratives, it could be just observation that you make when you go to some place or you attend a seminar. So archives have different shapes, because generally people think archives would mean something written, something from the past that you discover in the dusty files. So my presentation is just to let you know that, what's going on in reference to archives in today's world. And then, archives could be official, could be private, could be formal, could be informal, could be visual, could be written, could be audio, all kind of, And every government, we have about 200 governments in the world, 200 nation states. So every government, I don't see any government ignoring organization of the archival centers. Every government tries to preserve. They make it classified, and now the problem for us, students and scholars, is how to access those archives. And this is the problem that you, for your MPhil, for your PhD, run into. That archives are there, archival centers are there, that have different names: documentation center, provincial archives, national archives, Qaid-e-Azam papers, Muslim League papers, or district records, or revenue records, or personal archives in the families. But the problem is accessibility. So government on the one hand take great pride in organizing seminars, archives, but at the same time they're very restrictive. And in the West they used to be restrictive, but now most of the Western governments make most of their archives, if not all, most of their archives accessible, available after 30 years. So you could read what was being written by the American diplomats in Pakistan in the 1950s or 1960s. Same thing, you could read lots of different archives from the British High Commission in Karachi or later on in Islamabad. And same way, so those kind of diplomatic archives are easily available. But then there are newspapers, there are all kind of... So archives is a growing area. And I'll tell you about some of the places in Britain that I'm very well familiar with, how those archives are being so helpful. Like the British Library. And before the British Library, it was the British Museum, where our luminaries like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, did his research. And in America, every university takes great pride in having an excellent library, not just the books, but private collections, special kind of regional, global archives. And many people who have family archives in the Western world, they generally donate those papers to the universities. So that is how archives have been increasing, multiplying. Space is an issue, but now with digitization, lots of those archives are being accommodated and they're available online. In Pakistan, I think we need to create awareness. First, that we need to get into writing, diaries, whatever, because we still are largely an oral society. ज़ुबानी बातें शातें हम बहुत करते हैं, लिखने की बात नहीं करते. तो एक तो हमें लिखनी, दूसरा यह है कि whatever is written or whatever is there in the family, we should make sure that it is preserved or is given to an academic institution, so they look after it. And maybe, you never know, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the line, people will benefit, from those archives. So archives should not be just left at the discretion of the government. We, citizens, institutions, families, especially those who move around, who are professional, who have done things in their lives, they should really give this kind of interest, dedicated interest to preserving archives. आपको पता है कि सबसे पहले उर्दू में या इवन फारसी में हज के बारे में किसी औरत की किताब आज से सिर्फ 150 साल 200 साल पहले लिखी गई, नवाब शाह जहाँ बेगम, and she was नवाब अब्बास. उससे पहले किसी ने नहीं लिखी. For 1500 years, we Muslims have been going to Makkah, Medina, we have been going to Najaf, Karbala, and all the holy places. But when you look back, the very few things, ज़ुबानी बहुत है, लिखा हुआ नहीं है. Even Gulbadan Begum, Professor Qamar Abbas Saab knows better than I do, that even Gulbadan Begum, she ended up spending 5 years in Hijaz. She was held back, and she was the Pupo, auntie of Akbar. And she writes this beautiful book, Humayun Nameh, but there's no mentioning of Hajj. And it was not easy to travel. It was very difficult. That's why she was held back in Hijaz for 5 years. तो मेरा मकसद कहने का ये है कि it is never too late to make a beginning. And I think here we have to create this awareness through these workshops, and not just for dissertation, but in the long run we should have we should have archives at the local level, tehsil level, thana level, zilla level, family level, so that we could develop, historical scholarship and any other kind of scholarship dealing with humanities. For example, the news has been recently about archives. British colonial documents, as I said, not all of them are available. If you are looking for files on Kashmir dispute, you wouldn't find them. Some of them are available in National Archives or at the British Library. In East Africa, in Kenya, there was a movement in the 1950s. It is called Mau Mau. Thousands of people died. It was a movement of resistance. It was against Europeans, means the British, but lots of Africans got killed. Only 25, 30 Europeans got killed. So this is called Mau Mau, and later on, Kenya became independent. So the archives about Mau Mau are not totally available, but some archives have been made available. And because of those archives, many people in Kenya, some of those people who were involved in Mau Mau and then they were brutalized by the police, by the colonial authorities, are now demanding reparations. And their cases are being heard by the British courts. And people are being paid money. And people are, expecting apologies. And this is simply because some of those archives about Mau Mau movement have been made available. And credit goes to Caroline Elkins. She's a professor, if you Google her name, at Harvard University. She wrote a book about it, and this is how historians became aware of the brutalities which the British government used to suppress this movement in East Africa, in Kenya today. So archives play a very important role. I give you another example. Iris Chang. She's gone now, she's dead. She was a Chinese historian. She wanted to know what the Japanese did to the Chinese before they before the Second World War. And you know, Japan attacked China many times. They captured Manchuria in the 1920s, 1930s, and before that, Korea. So they attacked Nanjing, the ancient capital, and they killed lots of people. So Iris Chang, being a Chinese, living in America, PhD student, she went to China at a time when China was not open. And she did the research, and she interviewed people who had suffered or whose relatives had suffered. And she found out that at least 900,000 to 1 million Chinese lost their lives. They were women, children, people who were not really soldiers. And she, because you know there is a problem between China and Japan, even today as we speak. The Chinese are demanding an apology from Japan for what Japan has done as a colonial power in the 20th century, especially in China. And her book is a powerful proof of what the Japanese soldiers did to women and men in China. So the book is called The Rape of Nanjing. So when she took the evidence, interviews, and when she read the stories and diaries and letters and whatever, she wrote this wonderful book, which is a very sad book. I mean, if you're working on Chinese history, do read it. But she was so much mentally damaged that she developed illness and she sadly passed away. तो बाज़ औक़ात आर्काइवल रिसर्च में ये भी होता है कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें आप internalize कर लेते हैं. I have a Jewish friend. She lives in Israel. She is about 88 years old. So her whole family was wiped out in Poland during the Second World War with Holocaust. तो वो अक्सर आती हैं Galula. So sometimes she stays with us, sometimes we organize her accommodation. So her family is known to me. So Galula has published 80 books in Hebrew. So एक दो दफ़ा she started talking about her family with me, कि मेरी खाला के साथ क्या हुआ, मेरी छोटी बहन के साथ क्या हुआ, कैसे नेटजी ने उसको मारा. And she was crying, and then she started, this thing started coming out of her. तो बाद में उसकी बेटी प्रोफेसर है हिब्रू यूनिवर्सिटी में. तो लेया मुझे अलग कहती है, इफ्तिखार, मेरी माँ ने और जो हॉलोकास्ट के सर्वाइवर्स हैं, they never disclose their personal tragedies to anybody. But maybe she thought you are a fellow historian, you are neutral, you have Palestinian friends, you have Jewish friends, and you have, you know, read about partition of India and Pakistan, so she could relate with you. So she related with me. For 80 years, she didn't, 70, 80 years, she kept quiet. So some of these victims would never, talk about what they went through. Exactly, that is what we see today in India, Pakistan. So Hitler ki diaries ki, I want to give you an example. That sometimes archives could be very tricky. How? In the 1980s, Professor Saab or kuch doston ko yaad hoga, there was a breaking news. कि जी हिटलर्स डायरीज हैव बीन डिस्कवर्ड. सो पूरी दुनिया जो थी ना, उसमें प्रिंट मीडिया होता था, कुछ टीवी चैनल्स होते थे, रेडियो, बीबीसी वगैरह. Because this was a big discovery, because people are always curious about what happened to Hitler, how he lived, how he committed suicide. Just before suicide, he lived in a bunker, he got married and all that. So they wanted to know what he was writing about himself or the world that he was confronted with. तो बहुत सारे लोगों ने कहा कि this is the discovery of the 20th century. And even Trevor Roper, who was a very well-known historian at Oxford, one of the top-notch historians who had spent life studying German and German history and had written books on Hitler, and during the Second World War had served with the Foreign Office, British Foreign Office, he authenticated them. उन्होंने कहा कि ये तो हिटलर की डायरीज हैं. But few months down, and by the way, Roper जो था, later on he became member of the House of Lords. He was the personal tutor of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto because he was in Christ Church College. So anyway, very famous historian. He thought that these diaries, handwritten diaries, actually were, they belonged to Hitler. But later on they found out that the diaries were fake. So even, we historians can make mistakes when it comes to archives and judging their integrity. So I just want to mention. But these documents are very important. For example, आप सबने सुना हुआ है कि 1956 में there was a second Middle Eastern war. Israel, Britain, France on one side, and Egypt on the other side under Jamal Abdel Nasser. And the world thought that this thing just happened. But actually this war, this invasion of Suez Canal was cooked up outside Paris by the Israeli, British and French diplomats. They signed a secret treaty called the Protocol of Severus कि कौन पहले हमला करेगा, फिर कौन जाएगा, फिर कैसे नासिर को करेंगे, फिर कैसे यूनाइटेड नेशंस को इन्वॉल्व करेंगे. So this whole thing was cooked up in 1956 and then the war happened. Now this secret document is called the Protocol of Severus because it happened in Severus outside Paris. It was discovered by some historians. I think one of them was Israeli historian. And now we know the details. I mean, yesterday, day before yesterday, you might have read articles about America's invasion of Iraq 20 years ago and how the documents were cooked up. You know, these weapons of mass destruction and chemical and all that evidence was cooked up. Exactly same thing happened in 1956 in the Middle East. And this is how the historians were able to discover that this war was planned and how everybody was going to take an action. And Americans didn't know about it, but three parties, Israel, France, and Britain. And this was discovered by the historians. So it's called the Protocol of Severus. Aapki Hamoud Rahman Commission report, people talk about it, but has not been released, which again shows that governments are very protective. Ghulam Muhammad, jo aapke governor the, he was very ill man, but he wanted to continue as the Governor General. Unki bimari ki detail kisi ko nahi pata. It is still very classified. So what I'm saying is that archives are very important, but they could be very tricky, very challenging. And once you get hold of some archives, you have made a breakthrough. Archives बाज़ औक़ात आपको अजीब व गरीब जगह से मिलते हैं और shepherds के मिलते हैं. मसलन I don't know how many of you might have heard about Dead Sea Scroll. Dead Sea वो है जिसे गहरा मुर्दार कहते हैं. उसमें बदर वो ये इज़राइल और जॉर्डन के दरमियान है. आधा हिस्सा उसका इज़राइल में है, आधा जॉर्डन में है. तो डेड सी के बारे में बिब्लिकल स्टोरीज़ हैं, हज़रत मूसा की कहानियाँ हैं, आपने सुनी होंगी सारी. तो डेड सी के पास जो पहाड़ हैं ना, उनमें गारें हैं. एंड यू सी शेपर्ड इवन टुडे, बेदुइन शेपर्ड, खा वो इज़राइली हैं जॉर्डेनियन हैं. तो अ शेपर्ड found something in the caves, and those were hidden documents, hundreds of years old, in 12 caves, and they are called Dead Sea Scrolls. और उसके बाद अब तक historians उन पे research कर रहे हैं. And I remember there were exhibitions in New York, in London, in Manchester, and hundreds and thousands of people turned up. खा आप Jewish थे, खा आप Christian थे, खा आप सिर्फ historian थे. But these scrolls took people back कि प्री क्रिश्चियन पीरियड में ये किसने लिखी, क्या लिखा, क्या रिलीजन था, जूडिज्म क्या था, ये सारी जो है अभी तक वो चल रही हैं. डेड सी स्क्रोल, एंड दे वर डिस्कवर्ड बाय एन अरब शेपर्ड बाय चांस. वो अंदर उसकी बकरी चली गई, वो उसके पीछे चलता गया और अंदर से उसको बंडल मिले. एंड देन दीज हिस्टोरियंस गॉट इन्वॉल्व्ड, एंड नाउ लॉट्स ऑफ ब्रिटिश, Israeli and American historians are working on those Dead Sea Scrolls. तो आर्काइव्स बाज़ औक़ात आपको ऐसी ऐसी जगह से मिलते हैं कि आप यकीन भी नहीं कर सकते. ज़रूरी है कि वो लाइब्रेरी में किसी जगह प्रिजर्व हों. डेड सी के बारे में कहते हैं कि यू डोंट ड्राउन इन इट, कि उसमें इतना नमक है ना. I tried to, I mean I didn't want to drown myself, लेकिन I happened to be there. मैंने कहा मैं जाता हूँ. I don't live with swimming, but it has got so much salt कि जब मैं बाहर निकला तो मेरे ऊपर लेयर्स जमी हुई थी साल्ट की. तो वो हज़रत मूसा की जो कहानी है ब्रिज की, तो वो मुझे थोड़ी सी समझ आती है. एनीवे, सो डेड सी के उसके इर्द गिर्द मैंने वो सारी देखी जो केव्स हैं, और नाउ दे आर प्रिजर्व, जैसे आप टेक्सला को प्रिजर्व करते हैं, हड़प्पा को प्रिजर्व करते हैं, बिकॉज दिस इज़ वेयर दीज रेयर आर्काइव्स वर फाउंड. कलाम पाक के बारे में पता नहीं, आई डोंट नो हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू नो, यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ बर्मिंघम में देयर वाज अ PhD स्टूडेंट, जर्मन PhD स्टूडेंट. She discovered in the library somewhere down in the basement a shoebox. और उसमें उसने देखा, she was working on Islamic studies, you know, something related to Islam, so she knew Arabic. and she found these parchment जो आप देख रहे हैं, तो ये बड़ा तहलका मच गया कि ये कूफिक स्टाइल में होली कुरान है. One of the earliest holy Qurans which was found, अब पता नहीं मिडल ईस्ट से कैसे पहुंचा, but it was, even the librarian didn't know. Sometimes we know the librarians are the most knowledgeable people, but in the huge libraries there are lots of things which have gathered over the centuries, over the years. So this PhD student discovered these few folios of the Holy Quran which are written in Kufic style. So these are few examples I'm just giving you. So from Holy Quran, I happen to see two Holy Qurans which are attributed to Hazrat Usman, the third caliph. So this one I saw in Tashkent. You know, Tamerlane used to take everything away with him to Samarkand and Shahri-Sabz because he wanted to make Samarkand the most beautiful city once again. So, because the Mongols had destroyed, you know, Central Asia, the Middle East and all that. So he took lots of people from our part of the world, he took lots of money, he killed lots of people. But he also brought holy things from the Middle East. And one of them was this Holy Quran. So UNESCO and the Russian scholars in the 1920s, Soviet, they feel that this is the Kufic style which Hazrat Usman was reading when he was assassinated. But then there is another Holy Quran in Topkapi Museum, exactly इसी किस्म का, इसी साइज का, इसी Kufic स्टाइल में, जो कहते हैं कि मिडल ईस्ट से ऑटोमन के पास आया और वो हज़रत उस्मान का कुरान था. So maybe there were several copies of Musaf Usman which were sent to different parts. But this is one in Tashkent and it's called Hastemam. So it's a very beautiful place. If you happen to go to Tashkent, go to Hastemam and you will see how our Uzbek friends have preserved. And there are lots of manuscripts. सिर्फ यही नहीं है, अल-बैरूनी की चीज़ें पढ़ी हैं, इब्न सीना की चीज़ें पढ़ी हैं, अरबी में, तुर्की में, फ़ारसी में, बाबर की पढ़ी हैं. सो हस्त कुरान में कुरान शरीफ है, ओरिजिनल आपको नहीं दिखाएंगे, यू विल सी द रेप्लिका. इसी तरीके से व्हेन पीपल ट्रैवल एंड वट एवर दे राइट इज़ प्रेशियस फॉर अस डाउन द सेंचुरीज. आपको पता है वाइकिंग्स के बारे में लोगों को बहुत मिस्ट्री है, बिकॉज दीज आर द पीपल फ्रॉम स्कैंडिनेविया. These are the ancestors of Scandinavians, Norwegians के, Finland के, Swedes के, Danes के. तो कौन थे? कई लोग कहते हैं कि they had trade with the Arabs, they had trade with India. और कई लोग कहते हैं कि कोलंबस से पहले Vikings had discovered North America. So first book or first account of the Vikings or Norsemen was by an Arab. ये Ibn Fadlan था, who went from Baghdad. And he went into the valleys in what is Russia today and Bulgaria and Romania, and he met and he wrote about Vikings. So if you are doing the history of the Vikings, you will come across this name. अब पता नहीं लोग उसे जानते भी हों कि नहीं, लेकिन एक बंदा लिख के है, जो भी लिख के है कि ये कैसे लोग हैं, या अपने ऊपर टैटूज बनाते हैं, औरतें कैसी हैं, मर्द कैसे हैं, उनकी लाइफ क्या है, खाते क्या हैं, घर कैसे हैं. You know, he wrote because he was sent by the Abbasid Caliph as an emissary, and he built a mosque in that area, and he had trade relationship with the Vikings. So he wrote this. Now, no, we don't know much about the trade, but we know about the Vikings. So even in Denmark and Finland, when they're writing the history of Vikings, they go back to Ibn Fadlan. So your archives come in all different shapes. Ibn Battuta का आप सब सुना हुआ. I mean, people know more about Marco Polo than Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta traveled more than Marco Polo. But Ibn Battuta की मज़े की बात ये है, he didn't have a diary. He had a sharp memory. So 43 or 42 he was when he went back after all his travels to Central Asia, India, China, East Africa, Goa, and Mali. He goes back to Tangier. And he wrote everything from his memory. So some people don't use archives. They have seen the places, they have visited the places, they have traveled across the places, and they have sharp memory. Historians हैं आज ब्रिटेन में, Morocco में, they have been following Ibn Battuta to Delhi, to Goa, to Sri Lanka, Shiripada, जहाँ हज़रत आदम का पाँव का है, and they have found not a single error उन जगहों के नाम पे या उनके distance पे. So Ibn Battuta had such a sharp memory. He goes back to his father's shop after all these travels. He is already 42, 43, and he sits there and he writes his travels of Ibn Battuta. And these books have been written. I mean, if you are interested, you could Google and you could find out people who have learned Arabic and who have been following the route Ibn Battuta took, and then they keep the copy of Ibn Battuta's travels and see कहाँ कब्रिस्तान है, कहाँ मंदिर है, कहाँ दरिया है, कौन सा गांव है, कौन सा शहर है, कैसा मौसम है. He writes about all this. So there are people who may, have sharp memory. That's what I'm saying. Marco Polo के travel account जो थे, I mean, he spent more than 20 years with Kublai Khan, who was the grandson of Genghis Khan, and he traveled across the Silk Road and through India and through Vietnam, and he wrote this book. And this book, his Travels of Marco Polo, was the most widely read book after the Bible in Europe. और मार्को पोलो की वजह से कोलंबस और ये लोग जो थे ना, ये इंटरेस्टेड थे कि दुनिया देखें. And Marco Polo is the person who wrote about Hashishin, assassins. He went to Al-Maut, north of Tehran. So हमारे इस्माइली भाई खुश नहीं हैं क्योंकि उसने बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो हशीशीन के बारे में लिखी हैं. तो anyway, so people were reading, Marco Polo. And because Ibn Battuta was not available in Latin or in English or in French until recent times. So these travelers, with their writings, become our historical sources. That's what I'm trying to suggest. एक और जो discovery हुई कि in the 19th century in India, they started finding people with all kind of antiquities, rare चीज़ें, beads, textiles, अजीब-ओ-गरीब languages में. So the British officials in India, they got interested कि ये चीज़ें कहाँ से आ रही हैं. They're not from the subcontinent. And a couple of campaigns were led by this man, Sir Oral Stein. And they took Farsi-speaking, Kashmiri-speaking, Urdu-speaking people. This was a big campaign, which went through Kashmir into China, into Xinjiang, and then to the western region of China. And they discovered caves, like those caves in around Dead Sea. And these things were, the shepherds were bringing out those things. ये हुआ कि सदियों पहले monks ने, राहब ने, ये जो बुद्धिस्ट थे, इन्होंने ना वो चीज़ें अंदर छुपा दी caves में. And now in the 19th century they were discovered by the shepherd, and the shepherd were very smart. They were thousands of miles away from India, but they knew that these antiques had demand in Europe, at the museums, at the art galleries, at the personal collections. So smuggling jari thi unki into India, and then they will be sold in Lahore or in Calcutta or Delhi or Bombay, and they will be shipped to France and to Britain. And that is how you see some of these collections in those museums. तो फिर यहाँ से हिंदुस्तान से ये ओरल स्टाइन की campaign चलती है. He led 4 campaigns, and they discovered these caves. And now China, has this, what you call, very prestigious collection of these scores of caves, which have not just the Buddhist rarities, monuments, and manuscripts, but also some Muslim, Jewish, and Christian, and Hindu. Because before these religions went west, they mostly went east. And this is where, in the western part of China, जहाँ से ये आपका मुसलमानों का इलाका शुरू होता है, ऊपर काज़ाकिस्तान है, नीचे शिंजियांग है, वहाँ से वो सिल्क रोड के दूर रूट बनते हैं, वहाँ डंगहोंग है, और ये caves वहाँ हैं, desert में. So this is, these are the archives which are now found in 12 countries, and the British Library runs a project. It is called a Dunghong project. So if you Google it, you'll get more information. And this was part of Silk Route and archaeology and art and religion, and it's a heritage, everything. सिर्फ देखें कितनी scrolls अब तक मिली हैं उन caves से. 14,000 scrolls and paper fragment in Chinese from just one cave, 17. 5,000 paper fragments and 4,000 wood slips in Chinese from sites other than Dunhuang. 3,100 scrolls and pages in Tibetan from Dunhuang. तो सारी languages हैं. 700 in Tibetan from other sites. 7,000 in Brahmi, जो हमारे subcontinent की पुरानी language थी. And Kharoshti, जो हमारी ज़ुबान थी. हड़प्पा और ये आपके गंधारा की जो ज़ुबान थी, hundreds of years ago. उसके fragment वहाँ Dunhuang project caves में मिलते हैं. 8,000 papers in Tangut. So these are different languages. 1,200 items in Tosharian, about 400 items in Old Turkic, पुरानी चुगताई टर्किक से जो पहले वेगर की ज़बान है, and 150 items from one cave in Sogdian. Sogdian पुरानी language है ये समरकांद बुखारा की, इसको सोगदियाना कहते थे. संस्कृत में उसको क्या कहते थे? सोगदियाना. और हमारे इस नॉर्थन पाकिस्तान और अफ़गानिस्तान को क्या कहते थे? गंधारा. तो ये नाम है. तो Sogdian language थी, संस्कृत जैसी language थी. So you could see that how archives bring all. Now this is a parchment, prayer है जो यहूदियों की है, और इसका script क्या है? Mixture of two languages, Persian and Hebrew, and it is found in Western China, in Dunhuang. So, the Protocol of Sèvres, I already gave you the details, so you could Google it. But this is where I thought, how historians are very, I mean, some of them, when they go into the libraries, when they go to these archival places, how, they discover things, and then our historical knowledge changes. तो ये उन लोगों के नाम है. Avi Shlaim ने क्या कहा? Avi Shlaim is a great historian. He was born in Baghdad. He grew up in Israel, but he was critical of Israel and Israeli Defense Forces. He studied in Europe, in Britain, and he became professor of history, Middle Eastern history at Oxford. He's retired. तो वो महबूब साहब कह रहे थे कि मैं साइकिल चलाता हूँ, वो इससे भी 10 साल बड़ा है, वो भी साइकिल चलाता है. उसकी साइकिल मेरी साइकिल से ज़्यादा पुरानी है. So Avi Shlaim wrote a piece about, Protocol of Sèvres. और उसका आखिरी फिक्रा देखें क्या कहता है. ये जो खुफिया मुआहदा था तीनों मुल्क में. The Protocol of Sèvres was thus a monument to French opportunism, Eden's, जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर था ब्रिटानिया का, Eden's duplicity and Ben Gurion's paranoia. कि इन तीनों ने कैसे ये सारा कुक अप किया. So anyway, we move on. ये है वो Sèvres का, अभी गूगल करें आपको मिल जाएगा कि इसमें क्या क्या डिटेल हैं, and you will see how everything was planned to attack Suez and to get rid of Nasser. And Nasser was called Hitler, exactly the way Saddam Hussein was called Hitler, 50, 60 years down the line. अच्छा, इसमें और बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ें आती हैं. वाइकिंग्स का मैंने आप जिक्र किया. अब चाइना पे एक किताब बंदे ने लिखी है, ब्रिटिश नेवल हिस्टोरियन. ही हैज़ एक्सेस टू चाइनीज़ आर्काइव्स, और उसका नाम है गैविन मेंजीज. ये किताब बड़ी पॉपुलर हुई 10-12 years ago. चाइना में अभी पॉपुलर है, एंड इट हैज़ बीन ट्रांसलेटेड इनटू गॉड नोज स्कोर्स ऑफ लैंग्वेजेस. इट इज़ कॉल्ड 1421. टाइटल है द ईयर चाइना डिस्कवर्ड द वर्ल्ड. भाई कोलंबस ने नहीं डिस्कवर किया, ये यूरोपियन ने नहीं किया, ये चाइनीज़ थे एडमिरल, एंड ही वाज अ मुस्लिम एडमिरल who actually led a big armada into Gulf. Then he went for Hajj. He also went to Gulf of Bengal. He brought presents from the Ming Emperor. He also went to Kenya, and maybe he went to America. We don't know. So this is what this book talked about, and it challenged that orthodoxy. It was Columbus, 1492, who had actually reached the West Indies. And this book said no. 71 years before Columbus, they were discovered. ये जो मार्शल था ये मुसलमान था, and he was actually a slave of the Mongols, and then he came into the Chinese tutelage, and then he became very close to the Chinese emperor, so he became the admiral. And उसकी अब भी कब्र है, उस पर लोग जाते हैं चाइना में. बंदा था, लेकिन इस पे बहुत डिस्कशन हो रही है, बिकॉज कोलंबस को चैलेंज करना, इस ऑर्थोडॉक्सी को चैलेंज करना, इट्स अ बिग थिंग. So some historians believe that this could be true, but some historians believe कि नहीं, Gavin Menzies, naval historian, British naval historian, has been carried away. So you could form your own opinion. It's a thick book. I think you could find it in the Mall Road, near Mall Road, on Saturday or Sunday. I have seen it myself. You could get it for 200-300 rupees. But be aware of the fact that even now Columbus's orthodoxy stands as a sort of consensus point.